Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: the U.S. is doubling down on squeezing Iran's economic lifeline. The Treasury Department has imposed sanctions on several Hong Kong companies accused of facilitating Iran's oil trade. We break it down. The former mayor of Arcadia, California, pleads guilty to acting as a foreign agent for China. More on the key takeaways. War Secretary Pete Hegseth lands in Singapore. Will he draw a line on Taiwan? And what will his upcoming speech signal for U.S. military power in the Indo-Pacific? And rising tensions over Taiwan, the Pentagon is seeking a major defense funding increase for new weapons to deter China. The U.S. is slapping new sanctions aimed at choking off Iran's economic lifeline, targeting several Hong Kong companies. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has the details.
The current ceasefire still holding in place. The U.S. economic fury operation remains in full force as the Treasury overnight rolled out fresh sanctions targeting companies based in Hong Kong that the Treasury says was arranging shipments of millions of barrels of Iranian crude oil to Chinese ports directly. Now, the Treasury is saying that they're targeting any illicit network that's trying to supply Iran with this economic lifeline, especially during this conflict. And we know that the Trump administration has been very clear in criticizing the Chinese and its role in that, as China, we know, that buys about 90% of Iranian crude oil. Meanwhile, President Trump again emphasizing that he wants to do the right thing, and that outweighs any concern for the political cause as oil prices were heightened during this Iran conflict. Let's take a look at what he said in a new interview. Watch.
So if you wanted to play that game, then you would wait till the midterms are over, and then the following hour, you'll attack Iran because they cannot have a nuclear weapon. Most people agree with me on that. But then it gets maybe carried into, the next election, whether it's a midterm or not. So you have a very short window for doing anything having to do with war. But I don't view that window. I view it, I have to do what's right.
And now today, oil prices are plunging on the hopes of the U.S. and Iran now reaching a deal. President Trump says the U.S. has all the cards. And of course, all eyes are on the next few days to see if a solidified deal would actually come out. President Trump is staying at the White House this weekend, working both days, as of course we know that the final negotiations are happening when it comes to potential agreement.
Officials say these companies help move Iranian oil through what they call a shadow fleet, including shipments bound for China. They also say the network facilitated gasoline transfers from the UAE into Iran using front companies and middlemen. Officials say Hong Kong-based Taida Company Limited helped move Iranian military-linked oil shipments as a front company for Sefer Energy Jahan. In 2024, the company reportedly moved nearly 2 million barrels of Iranian crude, worth more than $100 million, to China. A year later, officials say it delivered a similar volume again. Former mayor of Arcadia, California, Eileen Wong, pleaded guilty Friday to a federal charge that she acted on behalf of the Chinese Communist regime. The case centers on activities prosecutors say occurred before Wong held elected office. NTD's Christina Corona was inside the federal courthouse and has more. U.S. War Secretary Pete Hegseth arrived in Singapore Friday for the annual Shangri-La Dialogue Security Forum. All eyes are now on his speech tomorrow. Observers are watching closely to see how sharply he addresses China, whether he discusses the defense of Taiwan, and if he announces any new U.S. military deployments in the Indo-Pacific.
This trip to Singapore marks Pete Hegseth's fourth visit to the Indo-Pacific since taking office as U.S. Secretary of War, underscoring the Trump administration's strong focus on the region's strategic importance. On Friday, Hegseth joined U.S. service members aboard the USS Boxer, taking part in a physical training session.
You spend every day on this ship, in your platforms, preparing to be ready and as proficient as humanly possible, so that if and when you are called upon, you are ready.
He's scheduled to deliver a keynote address the following day at the Shangri-La Dialogue plenary session. Following the Trump-Xi summit earlier this month, both sides sought to anchor U.S.-China relations on a foundation of strategic stability. Observers are now watching closely to see whether Hegseth's speech will take a hardline stance against China, address the defense of Taiwan, or unveil new military deployments in the Indo-Pacific. At last year's Shangri-La Dialogue, Hegseth made remarks about China's aggressive activities inside the First Island chain, particularly what he described as threats toward Taiwan.
We are watching very closely China's destabilizing actions. And any unilateral attempt to change the status quo in the South China Sea and the First Island chain by force or coercion is unacceptable. Beijing is credibly preparing to potentially use military force to alter the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. We know, it's public, that Xi has ordered his military to be capable of invading Taiwan by 2027. The PLA is building the military needed to do it, training for it every day, and rehearsing for the real deal. Any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force would result in devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent.
Meanwhile, whether any sideline meetings will take place between U.S. and Chinese officials remains a key point of interest. For the second straight year, China's defense minister has skipped the meeting, and Beijing said it would send a delegation of experts and scholars from the People's Liberation Army to the Security Forum. As the risk of potential conflict in the region rises, the Australian Defence Minister emphasised the importance of maintaining dialogue and communication.
We've also seen China engage in the biggest conventional military build-up in the world since the end of the Second World War, and that has not happened with a strategic reassurance for other countries.
As for the skepticism among some Asian nations, there are concerns the U.S. could be bogged down in the conflict in Iran. The Australian Defence Minister, however, expressed optimism and confidence in America's commitments.
Indo-Pacific Command is the largest combatant command within the United States Armed Forces. If you look at their major strategic documents at the end of last year, the National Security Strategy and the National Defence Strategy, both of them place a real importance upon the Indo-Pacific. So we see that America remains very committed to the Indo-Pacific, and from our point of view, our alliance with the United States is absolutely fundamental to our national security.
Additionally, a new announcement is expected on Saturday regarding AUKUS, the trilateral security partnership between the U.S., UK, and Australia. Media reports indicate the three countries are preparing to announce a significant collaboration on uncrewed underwater vehicles.
Recent Pentagon reports warn China is undergoing the largest nuclear buildup in its history, renewing concerns about nuclear risks in the Taiwan Strait. Reuters reports Beijing is building an extensive network of launch sites, bunkers, and communications hubs near remote missile silo fields housing its longest-range nuclear missiles. Experts say the goal is to ensure China can still launch a nuclear counterattack, even if the U.S. strikes first. China maintains a no-first-use nuclear policy, saying it would not be the first to use nuclear weapons. But some Western diplomats and analysts worry Beijing could still use the threat of nuclear escalation to keep the U.S. and its allies from intervening in a conflict over Taiwan. The Pentagon is laying out new efforts to deter China in a potential conflict over Taiwan. These include expanded funding for ship-killing weapons, sea mines, and hypersonic systems. The assessment comes in a Friday report to Congress from U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, which takes a tougher tone on China. It warns China's military is undergoing a historic expansion across all domains. Beijing's forces are being trained for two key missions, unifying Taiwan and countering U.S. and allied forces, with readiness set around 2027. The report urges lawmakers to approve a massive $1.5 trillion defense budget, saying it's needed to deter conflict and counter China's growing capabilities. A key proposal includes funding for a low-cost system called Quick Sink that turns conventional U.S. bombs into anti-ship weapons designed to sink vessels. The Pentagon is also seeking money for new sea mines capability, including aircraft-deployed mines and covert systems that can be launched from submarines. Those efforts include so-called hammerhead mines, which sit on the seabed and use sensors to detect targets before launching torpedoes. The budget request also prioritizes hypersonic weapons, with billions planned for the Army, Navy, and Air Force, including new low-cost strike systems and air-launched missiles. Officials say the goal is to counter Chinese naval power across the Indo-Pacific as concern grows over a possible Taiwan conflict in the coming years. Canada confirmed Thursday that a Canadian warship transited the Taiwan Strait last week. The strait is a sensitive waterway separating Taiwan from mainland China. Canada's confirmation came on the same day Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited Canada. It marks the first visit by a Chinese foreign minister in a decade. As for the Canadian warship, it transited the Taiwan Strait on its own. It's the first such transit since Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney visited China, as Canada seeks to diversify trade away from the U.S. following President Trump's tariff hikes. China's foreign ministry said it opposes the transit. Taiwan, meanwhile, says the Taiwan Strait is an international waterway and that all countries enjoy freedom of navigation. What signal is Canada sending here? Vivek Najibullah, an expert on Canada-China relations, told Global Mail that the transit shows Canada must advance multiple objectives at the same time. On one hand, she said Canada is deepening economic engagement with China, which is expected to be a key focus of Wang Yi's visit. At the same time, she said Canada is also standing firm on its national security agenda. The European Union is warning its economic relationship with China is becoming unsustainable. EU leaders are now weighing tougher trade measures as concerns grow over a surge of low-cost Chinese imports and Europe's ability to compete. European commissioners met Friday ahead of a major summit next month, where leaders are expected to discuss new ways to protect key industries from Chinese competition. Proposals include diversifying supply chains and limiting China's access to parts of the EU market tied to metals, chemicals, and clean energy technology. Western countries are pushing to bring manufacturing back home after years of jobs and factories moving overseas. Trade tensions are also expected to top the agenda at next month's G7 summit, a meeting of the world's 7 largest advanced economies. It comes as China expands its control over rare earth minerals critical to defense, energy, automotive, and tech industries. China responded with warnings of countermeasures if Europe adopts tougher buy European policies. The EU has already imposed tariffs on Chinese EVs, but Europe's auto market remains vulnerable as Chinese hybrid vehicle sales continue to grow across the region. Staying on Europe, Germany is balancing ties between China and Taiwan as tensions over Taiwan continue to rise. A delegation is visiting Taiwan on a 9-day trip focused on economic cooperation. The parliamentary group says the visit aims to deepen ties with Taiwan as a key democratic partner. German lawmakers say protecting Taiwan is important and stress the need to maintain ties with countries beyond China. They also point to growing cooperation with Taiwan on semiconductors and next-generation battery technology. Coming up, lawmakers and experts are calling out foreign billionaires and Chinese Communist Party-linked networks for funding groups to oppose U.S. tech projects. Who's really behind the protests? Out of all the countries in the world, why is China the place anyone can find organs within a few months or even weeks? A documentary screening in Toronto reveals the chilling mechanism of kill to order.
There's the perfect match exists, or maybe even several, and then that person can be shipped and killed to order.
More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Money from China is pouring into activist groups here in the U.S., the latest battle fighting new data centers across America. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Concerns are mounting of foreign influence, including the Chinese Communist Party funding activist groups opposing new data centers across the U.S. Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna sounding the alarm on X, saying, quote, "The CCP has launched an all-out war against American AI. The divide we're seeing in this country is largely driven by bots and paid actors."
There are some states that literally are passing bans on AI data centers. And it's all being, it's not organic and local. Some of this is foreign source dark money coming in.
A recent report by the Bitcoin Policy Institute highlights CCP-linked entities are running coordinated anti-AI and anti-data center propaganda campaigns on American soil.
China uses social media sort of as a gain of function for their propaganda. Through the networks that we've identified in this report, specifically US-based nonprofits, they're able to amplify a lot of anti-data center misinformation and push those out into local communities in Utah, Idaho, Georgia, other places where these data centers are getting built.
Shanghai-based billionaire Neville Roy Singham, who has deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party, has funneled millions through networks linked to activist groups to oppose U.S. AI infrastructure and other projects.
Singham relocated to China and now operates as a CCP-aligned influence agent, coordinating U.S. nonprofits to destabilize American society from within. Singham attended Chinese Communist Party propaganda trainings, shared offices with Chinese state media in Shanghai.
Singham funds groups like Code Pink and the People's Forum. Back in February, the State Department said that these groups denigrate the U.S., whitewash the violence of Marxist regimes, and run cover for narco-terrorists like Maduro while enjoying an influx of cash from a donor network with connections to the Chinese Communist Party. Businessman Kevin O'Leary has also attributed opposition campaigns against his data center project in Utah to Chinese-linked funding channels.
They're basically bringing in millions of dollars into Utah to push out PR, trying to stop any advance in power generation or in AI compute or any kind of compute. Who would want that? Only the Chinese.
Lawmakers and experts are warning that these are coordinated efforts from the Chinese Communist Party designed to influence U.S. policy while appearing to be grassroots. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Why does China have such an abundant supply of organs? So abundant that foreigners can find a matching organ for transplant within months or even weeks, as long as they can put money on the table. An event in Toronto reveals the chilling mechanism of kill to order. NTD's Dana Monahan has the key takeaways.
Based on true events, State Organs, Unmasking Transplant Abuse in China, follows the deeply personal journeys of two families who have spent decades searching for loved ones who disappeared while in police custody. What they uncover is unimaginable, a state-run organ harvesting operation that still exists today. Their story is one of heartbreak, courage, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. New York Times bestselling author and filmmaker Jan Jekielek discussed his newly released book Killed to Order, China's Organ Harvesting Industry and the True Nature of America's Biggest Adversary, following the screening. The book uncovers the crime of forced organ harvesting in China. Jekielek says that in countries like the United States and Canada, organ transplantation follows a strict ethical process. Organs typically come from catastrophic accidents, medical teams determine a donor cannot recover, and matching systems pair organs with recipients based on medical compatibility, which is why patients often wait months or years for a transplant. He says in communist China, this system is inverted into what he calls a kill-to-order model.
There's a database of people, these incarcerated Falun Gong practitioners, and more recently, after 2015, 2016, also, they added Uyghur Muslims to the kind of pool of these so-called donors. They're blood typed and tissue typed in advance into a database. So when I show up and I pay that money, okay, someone is out there because there's hundreds of thousands of people that have been typed. There's the perfect match exists, or maybe even several, and then that person can be shipped and killed to order.
Jekielek says atrocities like this don't happen without first dehumanizing the targeted group.
Kind of people are being portrayed as monsters or inhuman because you have to, if you're a totalitarian regime like the Communist Party in China, you have to kind of convince the population, if you will, to go along with whatever the terrible things that you're doing. I don't think, by the way, I don't think most Chinese are fully aware. It's kind of an urban myth, this organ harvesting for them, because it's only the super elites who are ever going to get transplants of this nature, right? But police will say to prisoners, we'll take your organs if you're not good, or something like that. It functions at that level.
Yekelik says the Chinese Communist Party has a history of creating black classes.
The first were the landowners. The landowners were targeted because they wanted to seize their land, but they had to convince the population that it's okay to just take people's land without any recourse, and if they resist, kill them or do terrible things to them. Falun Gong became the black class in 1999, and that's what facilitated this particular extreme version of organ trafficking.
Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a spiritual practice in the Buddhist tradition. In July 1999, the Chinese regime launched a persecution campaign targeting the group that continues today. People who attended the film screening and book launch shared their reactions.
It's completely inhuman and immoral. So whether we're Christians, Jews, or Muslims, I think that goes against our values.
The atrocity, the brutal and horrible atrocity that's happening right now in China, and its ramifications, what it means for the Chinese people, anybody who holds faith or different value systems in China, and what a totalitarian regime will do to eradicate it and profit from it at the same time.
The biggest takeaway for me tonight is the good news being that there are excellent people like Yan who are devoting so much time and energy to this very serious issue.
Killed to Order by Jan Yekelik is now available for purchase. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you soon.